When the storm took everything, faith gave him more. The story of Ethan Carter. He built an empire with his own hands and lost it all in one single night. The storm did not just tear down buildings, it ripped through Ethan Carter's future. A young entrepreneur with vision, discipline, and unshakable drive, Ethan saw his entire business swallowed by a hurricane's fury. But where devastation tried to end his story, faith began to write a new one. Before we begin, I invite you to subscribe and walk with us through every chapter of this journey, a story of loss, surrender, and redemption. The storm will not wait for your plans. That truth struck Ethan Carter the moment he looked up at the sky. At just 29, with sandy blonde hair damp from sweat, piercing blue eyes restless with worry, and a lean frame that carried both ambition and fatigue, he stood in front of his warehouse. This was his kingdom, every box inside a testament to years of sacrifice. Tonight that kingdom was under siege. The sky glowed a menacing grey, almost green at the edges, as if the ocean itself had risen into the heavens. The winds howled in sharp gusts, carrying the bitter sting of salt and broken branches. Ethan inhaled, but the air felt heavy, suffocating. He had heard the warnings. He prayed it wouldn't be this bad. But when the first raindrops hit, hard and cold as thrown stones, denial evaporated. Ethan ran inside, greeted by the musty smell of cardboard and wood pallets. The warehouse hummed with silence. His employees were gone, sent home to safety. Alone, he pressed his hand to the cool steel of the shutters, as if touch could hold back the inevitable. Then came the roar. Not thunder, not rain, but metal shrieking as the roof surrendered. Water burst in like an invading army, filling the space with chaos. Boxes toppled, shelves collapsed, and with them, Ethan's dreams floated in the rising flood. His jeans clung to his legs as he stumbled, his shirt plastered to his chest, every nerve alive with panic. "God, please!" His voice cracked against the storm's fury, desperate and raw. He wasn't praying for profits, not for the company. He was praying to survive. The lights flickered once, then darkness swallowed the room. The wind's howl became a scream, the rain an endless drumbeat. Ethan pushed against a door, straining, but it slammed open anyway, the storm too strong, too wild. He was nothing but a man facing forces far beyond his control. And yet, in that chaos, something strange happened. Beneath the crashing shelves, the thunder and the flood, he felt it. A silence deep inside, steady and unshaken. A whisper, so faint he almost missed it. "Be still." His breath caught. The storm raged louder than ever, but Ethan's heart slowed. He didn't understand what had just touched him, but he knew this. The storm could take his business. It would not take his soul. And in that moment, a new story had just begun. The world was unrecognizable. When Ethan opened his eyes, he was lying on the damp concrete floor of his warehouse, clothes heavy with water, hair clinging to his forehead. For a brief moment, he thought he was still inside the storm. But then he noticed the silence, a silence so complete it was almost louder than the chaos of the night before. The air was thick with the smell of salt, wet wood, and something sharp. Gasoline, perhaps, leaking from a broken generator. Rays of pale morning light pierced through the gaping holes where the roof had once been. Dust and mist floated in the air, dancing in the sunbeams like ghosts of what had been lost. Ethan staggered to his feet, his legs trembling under his own weight. All around him, his life's work lay scattered and broken. Boxes were shredded, their contents ruined, waterlogged, and useless. What the storm hadn't drowned, it had smashed. He picked up one of his products, once pristine, now warped and soaked, and for the first time since the hurricane began, tears filled his eyes. The street outside was worse. Cars flipped like toys, power lines down, palm trees uprooted and lying across cracked asphalt. Neighbors wandered aimlessly, their faces pale, their steps uncertain. Some clutched children, others only silence. The sound of crying broke through the stillness, distant but piercing. Ethan leaned against what was left of his warehouse wall, his breath shallow. He had no insurance to cover the full loss, no backup warehouse, no secret fund waiting to rescue him. The storm had not just taken his inventory, it had stolen his future. He clenched his fists. Anger surged, hot and bitter. He wanted to scream, to curse the wind, the sky, the unfairness of it all. But when he opened his mouth, nothing came. Only a whisper. Why, God? Why me? No answer. Only the caw of a lone crow circling above. And yet, as Ethan looked across the wreckage, his eyes caught something unexpected. Amid the rubble, a neighbor knelt, cradling a child, trying to comfort him. Another man was lifting debris, searching for signs of life. People, broken as they were already helping one another. Ethan's chest ached. His business was gone. His plans were gone. But maybe, just maybe, there was still something left for him to give. The storm had taken everything. But perhaps God was about to show him what really mattered. The real rebuilding had not yet begun. The sun climbed higher, casting light over the ruins, but the warmth did little to chase away the chill that lingered in Ethan's chest. He stood barefoot on the cracked pavement, staring at the fragments of his dreams scattered all around him. His business was gone, his plans erased. But as his gaze swept across the devastated streets, something stirred inside him. A pull, subtle yet undeniable. A woman stumbled past, clutching the arm of her elderly mother. Her face was streaked with tears, her clothes soaked, and her hands trembling. A few steps away, a man struggled to lift a collapsed fence, searching for something, or someone, beneath it. The air was filled with muffled sobs, calls for help, the restless buzzing of generators sparking back to life. Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to turn inward, to curl into his own grief, to ask God again why this had happened to him. But then he heard it. Not thunder, not the storm, but a child's cry. Sharp, urgent, close. He followed the sound through a broken alley, heart pounding. There, beneath a pile of shattered wood and twisted metal, he found a little boy, no older than 6, with curly brown hair and eyes wide with terror. The child's leg was pinned beneath debris. His cries pierced the silence. Ethan dropped to his knees. "Hey, buddy, I've got you." His voice was steadier than he felt. With shaking hands, he tried to lift the heavy beam, but it barely budged. His muscles screamed, his palms tore against the splinters. Still, he pushed, and then, footsteps. 2 men appeared, rushing to his side. Without words, they joined him. Together, straining, they heaved the beam aside. Ethan pulled the boy into his arms, cradling him against his soaked shirt. The child clung to him, sobbing. The mother arrived seconds later, collapsing into tears as she embraced her son. She looked at Ethan, her lips trembling, eyes shining with gratitude too deep for words. Ethan stepped back, his chest rising and falling like waves. For the first time since the storm, he felt something break inside him. Not despair, but a wall, a realization. Maybe this wasn't about what he had lost. Maybe it was about who he was meant to help. The thought scared him. It also steadied him. He whispered almost to himself, "Lord, use me." And though the streets were still broken, though the ruins stretched for miles, Ethan felt it, the first spark of purpose glowing inside the ashes. The storm had taken his business, but in its aftermath, God was beginning to build a servant. The streets buzzed with confusion, grief, and exhaustion, but slowly, in scattered corners, small sparks of resilience began to shine. Neighbors who had lost everything shared bottled water. Families with half-standing homes opened their doors to those who had none. Out of the ruins, a fragile kind of unity was being born. Ethan Carter watched it unfold, his hands still trembling from pulling that little boy to safety. His own losses weighed heavy. The warehouse, his savings, his business future. Yet each time he closed his eyes, he saw the boy's face, saw the mother's gratitude. Something inside whispered, "Don't stop here." That evening, as the sky burned orange with the setting sun, Ethan climbed onto the back of a truck that had been overturned in the storm. People gathered around. Men, women, children, some holding candles, others just holding on to one another. The air smelled of smoke from burned wires and damp earth, but in the middle of that heaviness, Ethan felt compelled to speak. "We all lost something." His voice cracked at first, then grew steadier. "Homes, cars, businesses, dreams. But we didn't lose everything. We still have each other, and we still have God. That means we're not done yet." A hush fell. Faces turned toward him, eyes tired but searching. He felt the weight of their gaze, and for once, it didn't crush him. It lifted him. "We can't fix this in one night," Ethan continued, "but we can start small. Tomorrow, we gather food. We clear the streets. We check on the elderly. We don't wait for someone else to save us. We stand together. That's how we'll rebuild." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. One man raised a hand, volunteering his truck once it could be repaired. A woman offered her kitchen to prepare meals. A teenager promised to gather friends to move debris. Slowly, voices joined, one after another, until the heaviness was pierced by something new: determination. Ethan climbed down, his chest tight, but this time not from fear. For the first time since the storm, he felt as though his steps were guided, not by profit, not by ambition, but by purpose. He wasn't rebuilding a business. He was rebuilding lives. As the crowd dispersed, one older man with silver hair and deep-set eyes placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Son, storms don't just destroy. Sometimes they plant seeds. What you did tonight, that's a seed. Don't let it die." Ethan nodded, his throat too tight for words. He looked at the dark horizon, still scarred, still broken, but in the distance he could almost see it. A future rising from the wreckage, shaped not by what he lost, but by what God was leading him to give. Hope had taken root. The first days of rebuilding were brutal. The air carried the sour smell of spoiled food, the sharp sting of gasoline, and the damp heaviness of mud that clung to everything. Ethan's hands blistered as he lifted debris and dragged broken wood from the streets. His back ached, his legs burned, and his heart, though determined, often faltered beneath the weight of exhaustion. Everywhere he looked, need was greater than resources. Children lined up for food that was running out. Elderly neighbors sat quietly on doorsteps, too weak to move. Families shared one generator among many homes, its growl a reminder of how fragile their survival was. Ethan tried to stay strong, but each night when the sun sank and silence fell, he found himself staring at the sky, whispering, "God, how long can I keep this up?" By the fourth night, the strain broke him. He sat on the edge of what had once been his warehouse, head buried in his hands, tears streaming freely. He had encouraged everyone else, but inside he was running dry. "Lord, I gave everything I had, and it's still not enough." Then, headlights. The low rumble of an engine cut through the night air. Ethan lifted his head, squinting into the dark. A convoy of trucks rolled down the broken street, their beams slicing through the rubble. On the doors, painted in bold letters, were the words, "Disaster Relief, Volunteers of Hope." Men and women climbed out, unloading crates of bottled water, boxes of canned food, blankets, medical kits. Their voices carried warmth and energy as they greeted the weary crowd. One of them approached Ethan, a woman with short dark hair and kind brown eyes. She extended her hand. "You must be Ethan Carter. We heard what you've been doing here, leading, organizing, giving hope. We came because of you." Ethan blinked, stunned. "Because of me," she smiled. "Word spreads faster than storms. People saw what you started, and when people lead with faith, God moves others to join." Ethan felt his chest tighten, this time not with fear, but with awe. He looked around as crates were passed, as children received food, as families clapped their hands in gratitude. The relief had come just as his strength had run out. He lifted his eyes to the sky, stars barely visible beyond the haze of storm clouds. For the first time in days, he didn't ask why. He only whispered, "Thank you." The weight had been too heavy for one man. But the miracle was never meant to be carried by one man alone. God had sent help at the exact moment it was needed. The days that followed felt different. Where silence and despair once reigned, now there was movement, steady, determined, hopeful. The trucks had brought more than supplies. They had brought momentum. Ethan watched as men rebuilt roofs with salvaged wood, as women cooked meals in makeshift outdoor kitchens, their laughter returning like music long forgotten. Children, though barefoot and surrounded by ruins, played with sticks and scraps, their joy a defiance against the storm. For the first time since that terrible night, the air smelled not only of mud and salt, but of warm bread baking in shared ovens, of firewood crackling in improvised stoves. Life was returning. Ethan worked harder than ever, but now he wasn't alone. Volunteers and neighbors looked to him as a natural leader. He didn't plan it, didn't ask for it, but somehow people gathered around him, waiting for direction. One morning, as the golden sun rose over the shattered skyline, Ethan stood on the steps of a small church that had lost half its roof. The pews inside were waterlogged, Bibles torn, but the bell still hung above. He rang it, a deep, solemn sound that rolled across the neighborhood. People came, dozens at first, then more. Families, workers, even children carrying buckets. Ethan spoke to them, his voice steady though his heart trembled. We've seen what storms can take, but we're learning what storms can never destroy. Our faith, our unity, our purpose. If we keep standing together, this place won't just survive, it will rise stronger than before. A murmur of agreement turned into claps, then into shouts of, "Yes!" Hands lifted, faces lit with determination. The broken streets had become a gathering ground for resilience. Later that afternoon, Ethan sat with an elderly woman, her skin weathered like parchment, her voice soft as a hymn. She pressed a wrinkled hand over his. "Son," she said, "your warehouse is gone. But maybe God never meant for you to build walls. Maybe He meant for you to build people." Her words sank deep, piercing through every doubt that remained. Ethan felt the weight of them like fire in his chest. For years, his life had been about products, profits, expansion. But now he saw a vision far bigger than himself. He wasn't just surviving. He wasn't just helping. He was answering a call. The storm had scattered the pieces of his old life, but God was shaping them into something entirely new. The storm had destroyed buildings, but in its wake, it had built something Ethan never imagined. A community alive with compassion. Every corner of the neighborhood echoed with the sound of hammers striking wood, of laughter returning in fragments, of prayers whispered aloud under open skies. Ethan stood in the middle of it all, not as a businessman, but as a servant. His hands, once trained to hold pens and contracts, were now calloused from lifting lumber and hauling debris. His clothes, once crisp and formal, were now stained with sweat and dirt. And yet, he had never felt richer. One afternoon, a volunteer approached him. She was young, with a notebook tucked under her arm, and eyes full of curiosity. "Ethan," she said, "people are talking. They say you're more than just helping here. You're leading something bigger. What's next for you?" The question lingered. What was next? For so long, next had meant growth, expansion, profits. But now, as he looked around at the rebuilt roofs, at children laughing while holding donated toys, at neighbors singing hymns together as they worked, he saw it clearly. That evening, he gathered the community once again beneath the broken bell tower of the church. With lanterns glowing and voices hushed, Ethan spoke words that came not from strategy, but from surrender. "I thought my purpose was my business. I thought my future was in what I could build with my own two hands. But the storm stripped all of that away. And now I see. My mission isn't to rebuild things. My mission is to rebuild lives. Not just here, not just now, but wherever God leads." The crowd listened in silence, their eyes glistening with firelight. Some nodded, some wept. The elderly woman from before whispered, "Amen." Ethan continued, "What happened here doesn't have to stay here. We can be the hands and feet of Christ in every storm, in every place of brokenness. I don't know exactly how yet, but I know this. I won't stop." The words weren't rehearsed, but they felt like truth. They felt like destiny. That night, As he lay beneath the open sky, stars peeking through torn clouds, Ethan whispered one final prayer before sleep claimed him. Lord, if you'll send me, I'll go. And for the first time since the hurricane, he didn't dream of the storm. He dreamed of fields wide open, of people waiting for hope, of light breaking through darkness. The storm had ended. The mission had just begun. Weeks turned into months. The ruins that once looked like scars now bore the marks of healing. Houses rose again, some small, some patched with mismatched wood, but they stood, living testimonies of resilience. Streets, once littered with debris, now carried the laughter of children and the steady rhythm of hammers and saws. Ethan Carter walked those streets every day, no longer as the owner of a business, but as a brother to all who lived there. He had traded boardroom meetings for prayer circles, spreadsheets for shared meals, and sales projections for plans of restoration. And strangely, beautifully, he had never felt more alive. People began to call him the man who gave hope after the storm. Volunteers wrote his name in their reports. Churches from other towns sent letters asking for him to share his story. His voice, once limited to business pitches, now carried a different authority. The kind born not of ambition, but of brokenness surrendered to God. One afternoon, as the golden light of dusk washed over the repaired church, Ethan stood before a crowd. The building was still modest, the roof patched, the bell rusted, but the pews were filled with faces glowing with faith. He spoke softly, but every word rang with weight. I once thought storms ended stories, but I've learned something greater. Storms don't end stories, they begin them. What was taken from me has been replaced by something I could never have built on my own. A family, a mission, a faith that cannot be shaken. He paused, scanning the faces before him. Children he had helped rescue, neighbors who had rebuilt alongside him, strangers who had become kin. His eyes brimmed with tears, not of grief but of awe. This legacy, he continued, voice thick with emotion, is not mine. It belongs to God. And as long as I breathe, I will keep planting seeds of hope wherever storms may strike, because storms are not the end. With God, storms are the beginning of miracles. The congregation rose, some clapping, some weeping, others lifting their hands in worship. The sound echoed into the evening sky, a chorus of gratitude rising higher than the ruins had ever stood. Ethan closed his eyes, the warmth of the moment washing over him. He no longer feared the winds, for he knew his foundation was unshakable. The storm had destroyed his business, but through the storm, God had built his life. Years later, when asked about the hurricane, Ethan would smile, not bitterly, but knowingly. He would walk to the shelves of a modest office, filled not with products to sell, but with journals of lives changed, letters of thanks, and photographs of rebuilt homes. I lost everything, he would say, but in losing everything I found the only thing that matters: faith, purpose, and the joy of serving others. He had become not just a survivor, but a witness, proof that even in the fiercest storms God whispers, "Be still," and those who heard his story carried that whisper into their own storms. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. And Isaiah 43:2. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to subscribe so you don't miss the next journey of faith we'll share here. And please, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, because your story too is part of this family of hope.